What's up, everybody? Today we're going to be going through how to make your own Among Us astronaut model and rig in Blender. Now, if you haven't heard of Among Us, it's a hilarious game. I highly recommend you check it out. I'll put a link to it in the description below. That being said, they are not a sponsor of this video. However, I just thought it would be a fun tutorial to make. So with that, let's get started. So first off, I just want to say that even though this is a simple character, I'm going to be moving through this pretty quickly. So if you're not familiar with the Blender interface, this may be a bit too fast paced for you. That being said, if you are, then Among Us astronauts are a pretty simple character design. So it's actually a pretty great place to get started. So let's hop in. First things first, I'm going to make sure I have a few preferences enabled here. I'm going to go into add-ons up here and I'm going to search for extra. And I'm going to make sure I have extra objects and extra mesh there enabled. And then I'm going to make sure I have loop tools enabled. We may not use all of these, but I definitely use these on almost every project. So just make sure to have those enabled to keep up. Now what we're going to do is hit Shift A and we're going to add a round cube, which this comes from the extra objects. And I'm going to change here to quad sphere. By default, I believe it's rounded cube. So we'll go ahead and change this to a quad sphere there. And what this does is just gives us a sphere made from a cube. And the reason I want to do that is that when I add a subdivision and smooth it, you'll see that it won't add that kind of pinching you get when you get from the UV spheres or the icospheres. Now I'm going to go back here into front view, and if you're having trouble keeping up with what view I'm in, because I use the number pad, up here it'll say what view I'm in. I'm going to tab into edit mode. I don't really want subdivision to affect my edit mode, so I have this toggled off here. And now what I'm going to do is go into wireframe mode, and we're going to start kind of working on getting the shape of the Among Us astronaut. So first things first, I'm going to grab this top section here with a box select, and I'm going to hit E and then Z. What that's going to do is extrude up here. So we're just going to bring this up to maybe that line right there. Now I'm going to take these bottom ones and I'm going to turn on proportional editing there. And I'm going to hit scale SZ. And I'm just going to scale that down. And you can change your sphere of influence there. And I want to give them a nice little rounded bottom. Perfect. That looks great. Now you can see that because we have the cube and we're kind of stretching things, we're starting to get some kind of angles here. And you can kind of see the shape of the cube sitting in there. Now, just to avoid getting any kind of pinching or anything from that sphere, I'm going to switch to edge select mode. And then I'm going to alt click this. I'm going to hit S and Z, but first I want to turn off my proportional editing. Make sure to do that. And then we're going to hit S and Z. I'm going to scale that down and kind of flatten out those angles some. And I'm just going to kind of flatten them out just a little bit, one by one. And I'm never going to fully flatten them out because I don't want to ruin the edge flow, but we're kind of looking for a nice arch here. You can already see that looks a little bit better. Let's tab back out into object mode and look at it solid view, make sure we don't have any corners there. And that really helps with kind of those corner pinching by smoothing out that edge flow right there. And with here, we're almost done with the body of the astronaut. Now, I think they're a little bit taller, so I'm going to go back here into wireframe mode. And I'm going to switch to vertices, box select these, and I'm going to grab those and move those down on the Z axis just a little bit, and maybe flatten out that bottom just a tiny bit by scaling it in on the Z. Now we are rigging this character, so we're going to want to add a little bit of line work here so that we can animate that character and bend the body a little bit. So by hitting Control R, you can insert an edge loop, and by rolling up on the mouse wheel, you can introduce more edge loops. So that's how I went about doing that. And what you're looking for is just kind of even sized faces. You don't want too many things crammed up or anything like that. That being said, I think this is a great starting point. Now the astronauts are not completely round. So if we go here in the top view, we can see that it is completely round. So what we're going to do is hit A to select everything, and then we're going to scale in on the Y by hitting S and Y, and of course you can use your gizmos. We're just going to bring that in just a little bit, just to kind of get those bodies that way. Now I want the sides to be a little bit squarer because that's kind of what those characters have. So what I'm going to do is circle select by pressing C, and I'm going to grab these vertices over here. And you can kind of see that that's remnants of being subdivided from a cube. And what I'm going to do is turn on proportional editing there. I'm going to hit SX and kind of scale that in just a little bit. And then we're going to do the same thing on this side. Just SX, just scale that in just ever so slightly. And with that, I'm pretty happy with the shape of the kind of Among Us astronaut body. So now we'll go ahead and add the legs and the face mask and a backpack. So first of all, for the face mask, we'll just go ahead and add another sphere. Now their spheres are kind of crunched down on the front of their face, their little mask. So we'll go ahead and edit that here in a second. I'm going to add this out here. Round cube again, we have that from before. I'm going to switch to side view by pressing 3. I'm going to bring that forward on the y-axis ever so slightly. And then I'm going to scale that down. I'm going to bring that up on the z-axis. And if you want, you can use the gizmo here, and we can just kind of move this around until we get it somewhere that we're kind of happy on our character. Now, they don't have a perfect sphere for a helmet, so I'm actually going to turn on the scale gizmo. I think that might be a bit easier in this instance. I have my global transform orientations on, so I'm going to go ahead, take this, scale it out on the X ever so slightly, and I feel like they might have a little bit more squish on the Z there. Now what we're going to do is grab the grab gizmo and just move this back ever so slightly. And I feel like that's pretty accurate to about the size of their facial mask. So we'll go ahead, right click this, hit shade smooth, and with that you can already see it's starting to look like an Among Us character. So what we can do now is add the legs and the backpack, and if we want, we can also add an edge ring around here. Now this is an extra step I'm going to do. This isn't in the character design when you're playing the games, but I personally just think that since we're in 3D, it might make it a little bit easier to kind of read as a face mask. So what I'm going to do out here in object mode is I'm going to come up here, I'm going to turn on my wireframe mode, and what I'm going to do is just bring this forward, and I'm just trying to kind of get one of these edge loops exposed right here. Now I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to switch to edge selection here. I'm going to grab this, then I'm going to grab the grab gizmo up here. Now I alt click that to select the entire edge loop. Let's make sure the sphere of influence is off. That's so easy to leave on. I'm going to grab this on the y-axis with the gizmo, and I'm just going to pull that back. And inside of there, that's going to kind of make that geometry look ugly. If we want, we can actually zoom in, and we can actually grab this center point back here in the back of the sphere. You don't need to do this, but I'm just going to do this to save on geometry. And then if you hit Control plus, you'll actually grow that out. And then if we hit X, we can delete the faces, and then we don't have to worry about the geometry in there kind of cluttering up or causing us issues later. Now let's switch to face selection mode, and then I'm going to alt click there, and that will allow me to select that entire edge loop. Now I'm going to press I, which will allow us to inset it, but we want to make sure that that's maxed all the way out, and then we're going to hold Control. And then if we drag out, we're going to get a little bit of an edge loop there. Now you can see here that it's not entirely showing through on the bottom, and that's just because of the rotation of our mask. So what I'm going to do, select everything, I'm going to use this rotate here, and I'm just going to kind of use these gizmos to maybe make it easier for beginners to follow along, and just pull that out ever so slightly. Let's make sure we don't have any gaps, and I'm pretty happy with that. So if you want, you can go ahead and add a bevel here. So I'm going to go into edge selection mode. So I'm going to press 2 there, and I'm going to shift click that one, and I'm going to shift click that one, and that will allow me to bevel both of these edges. And then I'm going to hit Control B, and then I'm going to drag, and just very slightly, because I just want a small bevel. And with that, that'll just give us a little extra kind of bevel there. I'm going to come up here to my viewport options and turn off wireframe, and I'm pretty happy with how that's looking. I'm going to come over here to this vertex tab here, twirl down normals, turn on auto smooth, and you can see here that's kind of giving us a slightly better render. And then what I'm going to do is turn this to 60 degrees, and that'll give us kind of a smoother degree there. Now I just want this to be part of the character, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab this object, hit Control J to join, and now they will be one, which is exactly what we want. So let's go ahead and look at how we can add the backpack. Now the backpack is just kind of a little rounded cube on the back. So because we have that extra add-ons, it's actually pretty simple to add. So we're going to hit Shift A, we're going to go to Mesh, we're going to go to Round Cube, we're going to twirl this option up here, we're going to go to the operator presets, come down here to the rounded cube, and you can see it's already made our backpack for us. It's just in the shape of the cube, so we will scrunch that down and put it into a rectangle. So let's go ahead, do that. Let's switch to side view here. Now, if you have a / on your keyboard, you can actually focus in on that object. So by that, we kind of just remove the focus of all the other objects. We can tab into edit mode here. We can switch to vertices, switch to wireframe mode, box select the back there, and with my move gizmo, I'm just gonna go ahead and pull that up there. Now I'm going to tab back out into object mode. Go to solid view, right click this, hit shade smooth, and that's a pretty good start for the backpack. Let's hit that / again, and all of our objects will return. Now let's just go ahead and we're going to grab that backpack. We're going to move it back to their back. I'm going to move that up there. Now I think this is definitely too wide, but this is a good starting point. So I feel like their backpack kind of goes from close to their butt to about up midway on their mask. So we'll tab into edit mode here, go back into wireframe view. We're just going to grab those vertices up there, kind of move it down there, and maybe make it not so thick on their back. Now let's switch to the back view. So if you press Control-1, that'll take you to the back view. You can also use this little gizmo up here or use the view. And we're just going to kind of bring this in to our characters because we don't want the backpack to be super, super wide. So that's a good size for the backpack. So now I'm going to click the backpack, I'm going to click the astronaut, and I'm going to hit Control-J. And that'll be a good start there. Now what we're going to do is go back in to the front view, and now we're going to give them some little legs. Now they have nubby little legs. Now, oftentimes when you're doing characters, what you'll do is you'll grab the bottom faces here, and then you'll just extrude those out, and then you'll spend a lot of time weight painting on more stuff. And that can be really difficult for beginners. So what we're going to do is actually join it, and then we're going to use a bevel node to kind of hide those creases, which is something they do in hard surface modeling, but it'll work here for our little character as well. So what we'll do is we'll add a cylinder. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Shift A, and I'm going to add a cylinder up here under mesh. And my cylinder here, I'm just going to use a Ngon fill. And what I'll do is I will drag this down here, and we're going to scale this down to about the size of their leg. So we'll scale that down there and move that up over here. And I feel like that's about the thickness of their legs. I'm just kind of eyeballing some screenshots from the game. And their legs are slightly longer, so I'm going to tab in edit mode, go into wireframe view, grab just the bottom section of the foot here, and drag that out. I'm going to switch back to the object mode, and I feel like that's about the proportion that their legs are. So what I'm going to do is right click this, hit shade smooth, and you'll see that we get these weird artifacts. Now if we turn on auto smooth and bump this up to 60, you see that it gets rid of those artifacts, but now we have a really harsh edge here. And the reason we were getting those artifacts is because of this Ngon face here. So we want to add kind of like a rounded look to the foot, but we also want to make sure that it kind of stays smooth. So what we're going to do is go into edge select mode. So I'm going to hit 2 here. I'm going to alt click this edge loop, and then I'm going to hit Control B and move that up. And then I'm going to scroll up on my mouse wheel until I get something I'm kind of happy with rounded foot wise. And I'm pretty happy with that. Now, if we tab back out into object mode, it should look good from there. If you're still getting some issues up here, I recommend focus slashing on that. We're going to tab into edit mode. We're going to switch to face mode, and we can just go ahead and just get rid of this upper face up here, and that will kind of save us some trouble there. Now let's go back out to object mode, go into front view here, and I'm going to / back so I can see everything. And I feel like here we have a pretty good shape for our foot on our character here. Now, if you want, you can tab back into edit mode, and since we're going to be rigging this character, I'm actually going to take this upper edge loop here and bring this up a little higher, and that's just so that when we rotate the leg, the front of this doesn't kind of pop out the front there and show that we have a kind of hollow leg sitting inside. Now what we're going to do is go back into object mode, go back out to solid view. We're going to duplicate that leg, move it over on the x-axis, and I just tapped X to kind of lock it there. You can also just use your move gizmo. We're going to grab both of these. We're going to grab this object, and we're going to hit Control J. Now let's go ahead and just add a simple little material here. So let's grab our object here, come over to the material tab, click new, and I'm going to call this yellow because I'm going to make this one yellow. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to pick a yellow color over here. Now for my final render, I'm going to switch to material view here so we can see what we're doing. Now for my final render, I'm going to use more of a plasticky material. And if you watch my clay shader tutorial, you can create a plastic material by following my clay shader tutorial. And then you just take the fingerprints out of the normal, turn down the roughness a bit, and you'll have kind of a similar plastic tutorial to what I had in my final render. Now what I'm going to do is add a backpack yellow because I want to make that slightly darker. So I'm going to click new here. I'm going to type in backpack yellow, or I'll type in yellow first. backpack. Going to tab into edit mode here. Now with face selection mode on, I'm going to hold L over the backpack and I'm going to click assign, and that will give that material to that backpack. I'm going to come up here to yellow, and a little trick here is you can hold Control C over that color, come down here, hit Control V, and that'll give it the same color. And what we can do is then make this just ever so slightly darker. And great. Now I'm going to add a light to kind of illustrate a point here. If you go into add a light here to the area, and we come here and we kind of scale this out here, we can see that we're getting these kind of like harsh lines where they're intersecting. Now, because we have the subdivision on, they're not all that bad. I'm going to turn this light up to make it a little bit easier to see. But one kind of simple solution, which I mentioned earlier, that you can get around with hard surface modeling, is you can go ahead, drag this out here. I'm going to open the shader editor. We're going to make sure that we have that yellow clicked right there. And what we're going to do, and if you're using optics, this won't work with optics because it's not yet supporting the bevel node, but we're going to hit Shift A, add a bevel here. And what we can do is drag this normal into the normal here, and you'll see how it kind of smooths that out. Now you can play with the radius there and turn that up a bit if you want that to be a bit smoother. And you can see that what it's doing is kind of smoothing out these hard lines here. Now it's not perfect, but when you're doing your final renders, it'll make it slightly less noticeable. And I found that just that little change that like once you get further away, immediately makes that look a lot less harsh. So that's kind of a little trick you can do there to kind of blend in modes together when you're kind of connecting ligaments like this. Let's go ahead and look at what we want to do for the little kind of face mask here. So I'm going to create a new material slot. I'm going to call this helmet. Then I'm going to tab into edit mode, and I'm going to hit 1 to switch to vertice mode. I'm going to select that center vertice right there. Then I'm just going to hit Control plus and get that all the way right up until the edge there. And I need to kind of determine where I want my edge to be. So I'm going to go right up there, and I think that's where I would want my glass to land. Actually, I'm going to go 1 back. You can hit Control minus, and that will actually go backwards. So we're going to assign this helmet there. I'm going to switch over to render view. Now I'm going to toss an HDRI in here just so I can kind of see some reflections. HDR Haven is a great place if you want to just get some free HDR textures. So I'm going to go ahead, toss one in called environment texture, hit open, and I just have some HDRs saved in here. I'm not picky about what it is. I just want to see some reflections on my character because I'm about to make this mask reflective. So I'm going to grab this, grab the material. I'm going to change this to more of a kind of bluish color like the mask from the game. And then I'm going to turn my roughness way down to 0.15, and you can see that gives us kind of some nice reflective masks. If you want, you can turn that all the way down and get kind of sharper reflections as well. Now, just to add a little bit of visual kind of like variety in here, you can go ahead and add a noise texture here into the normal or the roughness. If you want to add it into the normal, you need to add a normal map in between. So we'll go ahead, take this factor, put it into the color there, put that into the normal, and you can see it's going to make that kind of awkward at first. And what we can do is turn the scale up to a huge number like 500. You can see that's making it a lot smaller. I'm actually going to make mine all the way up to 1,000. And then what I'm going to do is come over here, grab this strength and turn this way down to like 0.15. And you can see that that's just giving us a little bit of bump there in our mask, which will just add some visual interest. To make this rim pop a bit more, I'm going to go ahead and select this rim. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to hit L while selecting that object in edit mode, and then I'm going to click helmet. I'm going to deselect the helmet. Then I'm going to come up here, grab the yellow backpack. I'm going to hit assign, and that'll kind of give us a little kind of edge there, which just adds a bit of kind of like visual variety and makes it a little bit easier to read. Now what I'm going to do is rig the character. So let's go out to solid view here, and we're just going to do a super simple rig. So this will be great for beginners. So I'm going to tab into edit mode here with everything, and I'm actually going to bring my character up here to the top. And if you're like me, your origin should still be there. So then now they can kind of rotate around the origin. Let's go ahead, let's hit Shift A. We're going to add an armature. And then what we're going to do is tab into edit mode with this armature. I'm going to switch to wireframe view so that we can see it. And I'm going to bring this up here to the bottom of my character. And then I'm actually going to bring this down on the Z axis so that kind of flip that bone. I'm going to move that up here. I'm going to grab this bottom one, and then I'm going to extrude that up all the way to the top of our character. I'm going to hit Shift A, that will add another bone. Then what I'm going to do is grab this bone, I'm going to bring it over here, and I'm going to bring it somewhere up here towards kind of the top of my leg. I'm going to go into my top view, make sure that it's kind of center in the middle of that leg there. And then I'm going to come down here. I'm going to grab this top piece here, lock it to the Z axis, and move this down to the bottom here. Now I'm going to grab this leg, hit Shift D, X, and move it over on the X axis here. After you've duplicated that bone, what you're going to do is grab both of these leg bones, and we want to grab this bone here in the center, but with this bone kind of in the way, that can be difficult. So what we're going to do is grab this bone here. We're going to hit H to hide the bone. We're going to deselect everything. We're going to grab both of these, and we're going to grab this bone last. We're going to hit Control P. Now we can do this and hit Keep Offset, and that will parent those bones to that. So now if we go out into pose mode here, we can see that if we grab this hip bone or this kind of root bone, we can move everything, but we can move our body independent of our legs. So that way we can kind of tie everything together. So I'm going to switch back into edit mode, go into wireframe here, and I'm going to Alt H, which will unhide that bone. And we just need to name our bones really quick. So I'm going to come down here to the bone tab. I'm going to name this one leg.R, this one leg.L. Going to call this one in here root. Then I'm going to call this one body. Now what we're going to do is tab back out to object mode. We're going to grab our object, then we're going to grab the armature. We're going to hit Control P, and then I'm going to do with empty groups. So armature deform, empty groups. Now what that will do is it will give our character an armature rig there, and I'm going to go ahead and drag that above our subdivision. But what we're going to do is come down here to the vertex groups, and you can see that now we have all these vertex groups. So what we can do is go ahead and start assigning things to these vertex groups. So now let's just tab into edit mode. So let's tab into edit mode here, and I'm going to make sure everything's deselected. And I'm going to select the left leg. I'm going to come to the left leg. I want to make sure that my weight here is set to 1. I'm going to hit assign. Now what I'm going to do is come deselect everything, select the right leg, and I'm just selecting by hitting L over that object, and because it's a separate object, it'll select the entire thing. Come up here, assign to the right leg, deselect everything. Now I'm going to select everything by pressing A. So if I select everything, I can grab leg here, I can hit deselect, grab this leg, hit deselect. So now I've selected everything but those legs, which I want to attach to the body. So now if I assign to the body and go back out into object mode, I'm going to grab this armature here. I want it to be in front so that we can see it. So I'm going to grab that, put it in front. And with that, we have a little character rig that we can use. Now I don't want my body to rotate my legs like that. So what might have happened is you might have accidentally had some of your body or your vertices attached to your body bone. So the way you can fix that is if you go into edit mode here and you select both these legs, you can click body and remove. Now that's only if you accidentally selected vertices. I just kind of wanted to show you that because I think that's a common problem that might appear. Now if we come back into pose mode, we can grab that and move that around, and we can see that we can animate our legs there. Now it looks like our legs are kind of popping out of the sides in edit mode, and we're also kind of losing our ability to go to the side here. So what we can do is we can go back into object mode, go into edit mode here, go into wireframe mode, and we can actually kind of grab these inner circles here, and we can come up here and we can actually scale those in ever so slightly. And that'll just give us a little bit of kind of mobility there without losing too much of our character shape. So let's go here. And now you can see that we have a lot more flexibility of moving our character around. And with that is a pretty simple Among Us rig. Now, if you wanted, you could actually add an extra bone and rig the backpack as well, so you can make that backpack kind of bounce independently of everything. But for this tutorial, that pretty much covers everything. So I would love to see what you create from it. So please tag me in your creations at Southern Shoddy on Instagram and let me know what you think in the comments below.